Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 5 of All In. Today, we will be interviewing Tommie Pearson Jr., who is a recruiter at Wayfair. So, we're so excited to have him join us. As we get Tommie connected to the live, please feel free to put questions for Tommie into the comments, or you can also use the questions feature. This is the Fleischman Center's Alumni Live Lunch interviews, and like I said, we'll be having Tommie Pearson Jr. joining us soon. Tommie graduated in 2018 and is a recruiter at Wayfair. So if you have any questions for him, again, feel free to put comments or to use the questions feature. And Tommie's connecting right now, so we will have him joining us in just a second. Hi, Tommie.
Hi, Cassie. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. So good to see you again.
I know. I was thinking that too. I was like, it is so fun to be doing these interviews and to be reconnecting with different alum that, like, you were in my office not that long ago, but at the same time, like 2+ years ago at this point.
I know. It's so crazy. It's such a full circle moment, and I'm super glad to be here, and really honored that you asked me to share my little bit of advice. So super glad to be here.
Well, thanks. I'm so excited to be interviewing you, and I have to tell you to kick it off that you have some fans in our Instagram story asking about who your best friend is from Binghamton and when you're going to visit them. So I think you may know who that is, and check in on them when we're done, because they want to talk to you. So like I said to anyone who's just jumping in, we are doing our All In with Tommie Pearson Jr. So Tommie, why don't you start by just kind of telling people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, for sure. So like Cassie said, my name is Tommie. I graduated from Binghamton in 2018 with a degree in political science. And after I graduated from Binghamton, I did a year service through the AmeriCorps program down in Birmingham, Alabama. And after my service year, I transitioned into the role of recruitment manager. And I stayed there until December 2019. And then in January of this year, I started as a recruiter at Wayfair.
Awesome. Great. And can you share a little bit about what kind of led you down this path from going into a service type of position and then switching into recruiting?
Yeah. So actually, during my service year, one of the components was recruiting college students, because my host nonprofit ran the largest student-run volunteer tax service in America. And so the AmeriCorps members were responsible for going to colleges throughout the Southeast to recruit those college students. And so I really enjoyed that. I love building relationships with the students. I love talking to the faculty. I love talking to different offices on campus. And so, like I said, towards the end of my service year, I got word that our recruitment director was leaving to go to medical school. And so I stepped into her position. So I think a lot of people grow up saying, they want to be a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. No one ever says that they want to be a recruiter. And I think that's really true, especially for me, because it's definitely something that I just happen to fall into and something that I really enjoy doing.
Yeah, that's great. And that leads to a question that another student asked about if you did any sort of research about recruiting. And I know you just said that you fell into it, but can you talk a little bit more about kind of how you learned about it, how you kind of fell into it, and what you've learned since?
Yeah, that's a big question. So I think I always knew what recruiting was. I think, obviously every company, every organization needs a recruiter of some sort to find talent.
Right.
I think, my first exposure to it was probably at Binghamton when I was in Greek life. We do a whole rush week where the entire week is meant to win over people to join the organization. Right. And then my second time learning about it was probably during my service year, like I said, when we were recruiting those college students. As far as, what I've learned between now and then, it's just so much. I think recruiting is like an ever evolving field. I think talent acquisition is one of those fields that's super exciting to be a part of, because it's changing every day. And as a recruiter, you have to keep up with the trends to remain an employer of choice and remain an attractive option for folks. And so I think I learned something new about recruiting every single day, especially at a company like Wayfair. Not only are we e-commerce, we're also tech and retail. And so, you're competing with companies like Facebook and Amazon, but also big box stores like Walmart and Target. And so
Yeah.
it's really hard to articulate, but I think that, you learn something new every day. And, like I said, it's an ever evolving field, and one that I'm really, really excited to be a part of, because I think, especially now, with everything happening with the coronavirus, you start to learn a lot about how companies respond to that pandemic, and how companies are continuing to not only attract but retain talent. I think, now is such an exciting time to be a part of recruiting, because, I'm a part of a company that has responded to the pandemic in an unprecedented way. And it's just incredible. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think all of that was great. And I think you make a good point that a lot of students, they don't necessarily go through their time at Binghamton thinking, I'm going to recruit more people to work in a company or something. But really seeing how it is an ever-changing field. And like you said, right now, we're really seeing companies handle hiring and recruitment and retention in such different ways that I think it's really eye-opening.
Yeah,
sure.
100%.
Good. So as you kind of mentioned your experience with Greek life, you were also very involved in your time at Binghamton and other on-campus internships and being a TA and other things like that. So can you talk a little bit about what you did at Binghamton that you feel like prepared you for your current role, but also for your service here as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, I was in Greek life, which was my biggest extracurricular. I didn't really join any other clubs. I was sort of involved with the Binghamton University running club, but very intermittently. I did an internship with the Real Education About College Health program. I was a consultant in the public speaking lab. I did a short stint in the bookstore. So I never really did any traditional HR or talent acquisition internship during my time at Binghamton, but I think a lot of the soft skills that I learned through those internships and Greek life really prepared me well, not only for my service year, but also for my position as a recruiter, because let's be real, recruiting is all relationship building. Right. It's all communication. It's all collaboration. Not only am I collaborating with my coworkers, I'm collaborating with stakeholders and business leaders to figure out what are the hiring needs of the business and how can I work with you to achieve them. And so I think through all of those internships, being a TA, working in the bookstore, they're just such transferable skills, and they're not hard skills. A lot of they're not quantitative or hard skills or technical skills, but they're soft skills. Communicating and collaborating and I just it's really hard to articulate, because I said, they're not technical skills or hard skills that you necessarily learn. But through those experiences, you learn how to communicate with folks, and I think how to build relationships, and that's of importance, as a recruiter, but also during my service year. I was working with families that were living at or below the poverty line, and it's amazing the way that you have to communicate with different people on different levels. So the way that I communicate with someone who is living at or below the poverty line, and the way that I communicate with a vice president of Wayfair is going to be very, very different.
Right.
But the fact is that you still have to know how to communicate with them in a very cohesive, concise way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I agree that sometimes these soft skills, it's so hard to articulate, and how did I exactly learn them? How am I using them? How am I proving that I have this skill set? But we are seeing more and more, and your role is a perfect example of it, and all the roles you've had, of how important those skill sets are. I think it speaks a lot to any student who's watching right now, that the experiences you're having at Binghamton, whether they are clubs and orgs or an internship or an on-campus job or volunteer work, whatever it is, that you can gain these really powerful skills that are going to be useful for roles, whether they're similar to what you're doing or completely different. They're going to be valuable to recruiters.
Yeah, totally agree.
Awesome. Great. And can you talk a little bit, you're in this recruiting role. We have a lot of students who have just graduated and are searching for jobs. What do you look for when you're looking for talent and talking to people who are interested in positions at Wayfair? Yeah.
That's a big question. So the first thing I would say is that Wayfair is a huge company. Mm-hmm. We are our workforce is around like 17,000 people. And the amount of departments that we have is insane. Like,
Yeah.
I am learning every day something new about this company. And
Yeah.
so I would say, those soft skills are incredibly important. Recruiters, we are the gatekeepers, so we are the people that you need to impress. Like, I'm not necessarily going to quiz you on your technical ability to code a platform or business intelligence or finance, but I want to see that you can communicate with people. Communication is huge. Actually, at Wayfair, we operate in 4 different competencies, and communication and persuasion is one. Innovation is another, critical thinking is another, and then team building is the other one. So I want to see people that can exemplify those qualities, because if you can think critically, if you can communicate well, if you can work well in a team, and you can be innovative, I want you on this team. And so let's start by talking about those things, and then let's talk about those technical skills and the things that are more role specific. So yeah, I really look for people that can communicate well, can buy into a culture and exemplify that and be good team players. I look for people who can innovate, because like I said, Wayfair is a tech company. And so how do we stay ahead of those trends? What can you do to keep us, fresh and fun?
Yeah.
So I would say those are the big 4 things that I'm really looking for. Now, when we start talking about more specific roles and and things that are important there, that becomes a little bit harder of a question, because it's super nuanced and it depends on the position in which you're applying for. But those 4 things are super, super important for me.
Awesome. I think that's great advice. And I would imagine you'd agree with the statement that, just as Wayfair has their 4 like core competencies that they look for, most companies and organizations have their mission statement, their core values, and those types of things. So definitely for students to be paying attention to those and connecting their experience to the things that the company values.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, Cassie. I would say when you are talking to recruiters, before you talk to a recruiter, before you even talk to a hiring manager, familiarize yourself with the mission statement and the values that the company try to operate within on a daily basis, because that's where you have to start. If you can't read a mission statement and see yourself living that out on a daily basis, that is not the company for you. And I know it's super easy to, want to like fake the funk and, really just pretend that this is something that you believe in. But I would say that, it's important to buy in. And at a place like Wayfair, it's incredibly important. Like I would say that I see those 4 competencies on a daily basis, and it's something that we talk about day in and day out. And so I really cannot stress enough, if you don't see yourself operating within a company's mission statement or core competencies, move on.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And I think, especially right now, a lot of students are feeling anxious and nervous about their job search process and what opportunities will be available to them. But, like you're saying, it's equally as important that you're finding the right fit for yourself too. And that you're not just like taking an opportunity because it's the first one that comes along. So along those same lines, what other advice do you have for, could be either a student who's just graduated and is job searching, or, someone who's still at Binghamton, but kind of thinking about how they can gain experience? Do you have any advice for them?
Yeah. So I would say that networking is super important. We live in the age of LinkedIn, and use it, definitely. I would say networking is super important. I would say go to career fairs. I know Binghamton has many. I know we have the big ones in the fall and the spring, and then the smaller ones based on industry. So go to career fairs. I would say use Handshake. That was of critical importance for me. If you're not on any listservs, through different offices or clubs on campus, put yourselves on them. Actually, I learned about my service opportunity through a listserv, through the pre-law listserv. I would say meet with career counselors at Fleischman. I mean, I lived in Fleischman my senior year, either for on-campus interviews or resume help or cover letter help. I would say go to Fleischman. If you're not in Harper, maybe go to the SOM, career office, Watson office, any office on campus that prepares students for career readiness. I would say tap into those resources. I mean, they're really, really good. And I would say for seniors or for students who just graduated and are applying for jobs, I would tell them, don't be discouraged by rejection. Yeah. A lot of times it's very, very you can take it personally when you get that rejection email, but I would say a lot of times the company is doing you a favor by rejecting you. And this is an opportunity for you to step back, reevaluate what you're doing, go back to the drawing board and hit that job search aggressive in a different way. And a lot of times when one door closes, I know this is very cliche, but another one opens. You know, like I was, before I got to Wayfair, I was rejected for several positions. And in hindsight, I'm so glad that I was, you know, because if I wasn't rejected, I may have ended up at a company that wasn't a great fit and that I don't feel passionate about. So I would say, do not take the rejections personally. I know it's hard. I've been there, but yeah, it's really, I really like to think of rejections as a company doing you a favor and pushing it back on you to figure out what you're really looking for and to find that.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's so true. And, you know, of course, easy for both you and I, right? We're employed right now. We've been in our jobs for a while and easy to say that. But, you know, I think you speak to the point that we've talked about mission and making sure that you're aligned with what the company's aligned with. And I think that's even more true now, that you do want to be a little bit picky about the companies that you're applying to and making sure that you align with their values and the way that they've even handled things recently with the pandemic, right? Like you talked about how Wayfair's handling that, and I can tell instantly, like, you believe in how they've handled it. Yes. And, you know, looking at some companies haven't handled it so well, and really reflecting and asking yourself, like, do I want to be part of that company in the way that they're handling this, or, you know, anything else that may happen while you're working there is valuable to think about.
Yeah, and I would say the other thing is when you're in interviews, remember that they're a two-way street. It's yes. not, I know it feels like they're interrogating you, but this is your chance for you to interrogate them too. And to your point, Cassie, it's a fit. Interviews are, yes, they are, you know, part of the process, but it's an opportunity for both parties to figure out if this is going to be a mutual fit. And so just as much as they're asking you questions, ask them questions, and ask them the hard questions. Ask them the questions that you really, really want to know. A lot of times I think people want to ask, you know, like, so what's your favorite part about working at Wayfair? Or what advice do you have for someone going in the next step? Or, you know, something that's like a stock question that's not really well thought out. Mm-hmm. It's okay to ask those hard-hitting questions. And if a recruiter doesn't have the answer, I know for me, if I don't have the answer to a question, I like to defer people to someone that will have the answer. So ask those questions because, you know, like you said, you want to make sure that it's a good fit on both sides.
Yeah, that's great. This is totally putting you on the spot and not a question I had planned to ask you, but what are some of the like best or hardest questions you've been asked as a recruiter?
That's a really good question. I think, does it, you mean like as far as working at Wayfair or just in general?
It could be in general, yeah.
Okay. I think so. Before I was at Wayfair, like I said, I was a recruitment manager at a nonprofit. And I think one of the questions that because when I'm talking to candidates, I like to give them a little bit of an idea about my background.
Yeah.
And I think one of the questions that I get stumped on is why you left the nonprofit world to go work at a billion-dollar company. Multi-billion-dollar company. And that is so difficult to answer because you're towing a very fine line that can become very controversial very quickly. And I think that question is anytime someone asks me why I left one company to come to the next is really, really hard to answer because I value all of my experiences and I don't want to put any of them in a negative light. So that's a hard question. I also think the hard question is, what's your favorite part about working at Wayfair? Or what's your least favorite part about working at Wayfair? That's really hard to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, those two questions are very, very difficult to answer. Or I guess those three questions are very difficult to answer.
Yeah, good. Well, then for anyone watching, you have some good tips on questions to ask a future recruiter. And I see Harper Edge is giving you a little shout out. So hi to them. Thanks for watching. Couldn't agree more. We love having Harper students who are back and telling us about all the different ways that they went. So Tommie, I really appreciate you jumping on this live with us. I have two more questions for you.
Okay.
The first is just for any student watching, if they have other questions or want to reach out, how can they connect with you?
Yeah. I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name on LinkedIn is Tommie Pearson Jr. Yeah, that's the best way to get in touch with me. Unfortunately, I only use like LinkedIn, or I only use Instagram and Facebook for personal reasons. So if you want to talk to me about career stuff or anything like that, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Great. And then my last question, because this is our live lunch interview, we like to ask a question about food. And so today is, what is your favorite breakfast item?
Whoa, that's really good. So I've been eating a lot of oatmeal.
Okay.
It's simple, it's easy, it's quick.
Yeah.
I really, really love the Quaker makes like a fruit and cream oatmeal series. So yeah, I'm sorry, is that underwhelming?
No, that is perfect. You know, I feel like someone on another live, it may have been Erica Freeman, I'm gonna have to fact check myself. I feel like she talked about something with oatmeal as well. So not underwhelming at all. I also love some, you know, a good oatmeal breakfast in the morning. So love it. Thanks so much, Tommie. Loved having you on, and I hope that you're doing well. It was so nice to chat with you again.
Yeah, you too, Cassie. Thanks for having me. Take care.
You too. Have a good one.
Goodbye.
Bye.